this Monday night. To Greenlight for the FTA bill. After weeks of locking horns, Korea's rival parties finally approved the country's bilateral free trade deal with its largest trading partner, China. No more trips to the bank. Two consortia backed by Kakao, Korea's most popular mobile chat service, and the nation's telecom company KT win initial approvals to set up the country's first online-only banks. And world leaders, including President Park Geun-hye, make national pledges in Paris and attempt negotiating an agreement that could help limit global temperature rises to 2 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. NewsCenter begins now. A very good evening to our viewers in Korea and hello to those around the world. I'm Moon Conn-young. This is NewsCenter. Finally, the green light. It's an issue Korea's rival parties have been locking horns over for the past 6 months. Korea's parliament on this Monday has approved the Korea-China Free Trade Agreement. Our parliamentary correspondent Park Ji-won joins me from the National Assembly. Now, Ji-won, the passage of this FTA has been a long time coming.
Yes, Conn-young, the Korea-China Free Trade Pact was finally ratified by Parliament on the last day of November, along with other FTAs with Vietnam and New Zealand, and a bill to create a free trade zone with Turkey in the service and investment sectors. Parliamentary approval of the Korea-China FTA did not come easily. Rival parties held sessions of marathon negotiations over the weekend, and it was only after each party got approval from their own lawmakers on Monday morning were they able to give trade pact a green light.
I hope the ratification of the Korea-China FTA and other FTAs will provide good opportunities for Korea's exporters during a time when the volume of exports is dwindling down.
Korea is an open economy with a high level of dependence on trade, so we cannot help but actively engage in signing FTAs. But we need to make sure that specific details of FTAs fit Korea's national interest and make up for sectors that may suffer damage from the pacts.
The Liberal Party earlier said they wouldn't support the trade agreement until a reasonable amount of compensation was made available for the nation's farming and fishing industries. So both parties agreed to create a fund worth about $1 billion in addition to $1.5 billion worth of compensation measures for the nation's agricultural and fisheries sectors. The ruling party and the government pushed up the ratification process to have the FTA take effect within this year. Now it needs to be approved in a cabinet meeting before it's officially proclaimed into law. The Korean government will then give notice to the Chinese government that domestic procedures are complete, after which the State Council of China is slated to approve the pact. The two countries have not set a start date, as the Chinese government has yet to promulgate the pact. Experts are now saying that China's domestic procedures will decide exactly when the mega trade pact comes into effect. Conn-young?
So basically, the ball is now in China's court. Thank you, Ji-won. That was our parliamentary correspondent Park Ji-won on the long-awaited approval of Korea-China FTA. Well, Korea is gearing up to have this new free trade agreement take effect as early as next year. That means Korean businesses will get to enjoy the benefits from tariff cuts starting January 1st, 2016. Our Kim In-ji breaks down the economic impact from Korea-China FTA.
Over the next 10 years, the Korea-China FTA is expected to boost Korea's real GDP by almost 1% and create over 53,000 new jobs.
The government will work closely with China and modify related rules for the trade deal to take effect this year. If this happens, tariffs will immediately be cut the day it takes effect and again on January 1st.
Under the deal, Seoul will eliminate import tariffs on 79% of all products from China within a decade, while Beijing will do the same on 71% of all products from Korea. In 20 years, duties will be removed on over 90% of all goods. That translates to over $5 billion less in tariffs paid by exporters every year. Korea's free trade agreement with its largest trading partner, China, is expected to provide new momentum for local exports that have fallen every month this year. The FTA is expected to boost annual bilateral trade between the countries to more than $300 billion, up nearly 40% from 2012. In addition, the deal will give Korea price competitiveness over rivals in China's huge consumer market.
Korea's early advancement to the Chinese market earlier than our competitors, such as Australia, United States, and other countries, is critical for Korea's long-term success in the Chinese market.
Like many other trade deals, the agriculture sector has been a sticking point. But experts say the level of liberalization for the agro-fisheries sector is lower compared to Korea's other FTAs.
Korea was able to protect highly sensitive products, including rice. There's going to be damage to some sectors, but we can't say it's entirely because of the FTA.
The government says the further opening of China could actually give Korea's agriculture sector more opportunity to make inroads into the Chinese market. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, over in Paris, President Park Geun-hye and some 140 heads of states have gotten together for the UN Climate Change Conference. This year, the leaders are working on launching a new global climate system. Our presidential office correspondent Hwang Sung-hee is traveling with the president, and she joins us on the line from Paris. Sung-hee, give us the details.
Hi, Conn-young. At this year's UN Climate Change Conference in Paris, world leaders are aiming to achieve a successor treaty to the 1997 Kyoto Protocol, which expires in 2020. Now, previously, the UN-led talks focused on haggling over the developed world's targets for emissions reductions, but this year they emphasized action by all countries. Now, all participants submitted national climate change plans ahead of time, which is known as Intended Nationally Determined Contributions, or INDC. Korea has set the ambitious goal of slashing greenhouse gas emissions by 37% by 2030. This was reiterated in President Park's speech as she laid out South Korea's efforts to counter climate change at today's opening session. She emphasized the urgency of the issue and called for a collective international effort for a successful launch of a new climate system. President Park also stressed that Korea is aiming to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by fostering a new energy industry. Part of the plan is making zero-energy buildings obligatory step by step and making the resort island of Jeju a carbon-free island. This means Jeju Island will only run on renewable energy and there will only be electric cars on its roads. And by doing that, President Park said that Korea will be able to create a new market worth $100 billion by 2030 and make 500,000 jobs. Aside from the climate conference, the South Korean leader has a busy day ahead of her. She's also set to hold a summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin and visit the Louvre Museum for a Korean fashion design exhibition in the evening. As for tomorrow, President Park will give a speech at the UNESCO headquarters and become the first South Korean leader to do so. Conn-young?
All right, Sung-hee. Thank you, Sung-hee, for that, and I'm sure you will keep us updated on the president's schedule ahead. That was our Hwang Sung-hee reporting from Paris, France. Well, to expand on the climate change conference and Korea's commitments, we are now joined live by our Kwon So-ah in the studio. Now, So-ah, this is a huge conference. It spans over a period of 2 weeks, and a large number of leaders are participating. Of course, not to mention the gravity of the critical solution that they are there to solve. We just got word of President Park's speech, and there will be negotiations that are unfolding as we speak, and there will be quite a few of them coming out from there. But could you give us the basics of what will happen in the next 12 days?
Sure, Conn-young. Now, as you just mentioned, it is a huge conference where more than 190 nations, that is, will be discussing how to avoid the increasing risks coming from climate change. And also, a possible new agreement on the issue is expected to come out of it. So why is this significant now? Now, commitments on greenhouse gas emissions will run out in 2020. The world needs a plan for what to do after that, and potentially a legally binding pact to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius, which is seen as the critical threshold for global warming. Now, climate change talks have been going on for decades, but many have been fruitless.
Now, could we say that that was the case for Kyoto Protocol?
Well, Conn-young, that depends on your viewpoint because it used to be legally binding, but some countries, especially key carbon dioxide emitters such as the U.S., did not ratify their commitments. So let's take a brief look at what's expected to be different at the negotiations in Paris. Now, while the 1997 Kyoto Protocol focused almost only on CO2 reduction, the new agreement is expected to be more comprehensive in scope and include finance, technology, and transparency issues. The new protocol should concern all countries, developed and developing. And it's going to have more of a bottom-up approach since the top-down strategy didn't seem to work out that well. And under the new system, nations will propose their own targets on reducing emissions, meaning there is less force involved, but more encouragement. Now, if a deal is sealed in Paris, it'll likely come into force beginning 2020.
Now, so we know that U.S. and China, of course, are key players here. They are not only the largest economies in the world, but the largest carbon dioxide emission producers, I suppose. But how big is Korea's role in this global combat or towards climate change, I suppose?
Well, Korea's role is getting bigger and bigger, according to experts. As of 2013, Korea was the 7th largest CO2 emitter, and with its economy ranking 13th as of last year, Korea's role is getting bigger, and I talked to an expert about this. So let's take a listen what he had to say.
Korea has so far been categorized as a developing country, but considering aspects like its economic capability, it's sometimes difficult to say it is. That's why for Korea it has been, and will be, its role to narrow the perception of developing and advanced countries.
Now, one of the major debates is how much responsibility each country should take, especially as emerging countries blame developed countries for current climate conditions.
Right, so for Korea to fit the role as a middle bridge or like intermediary between the emerging economies and developing economies, I suppose that should become a good example.
And part of its efforts is its leading role in the Green Climate Fund, or GCF, 24-member board with headquarters in Songdo, Incheon, that assists developing countries in dealing with climate issues. And also the Seoul-based Global Green Growth Institute. But environmentalists note that despite its relatively small size and population, Korea's energy consumption is among the highest, relying heavily on nuclear power that generates less greenhouse effects, but Korea's electricity production from renewable sources such as hydroelectric, geothermal, and wind accounted for a mere 2%, placing Korea 82nd. And that's why experts say it's high time Korea shifted its focus to those forms of energy.
Well, when we talk about renewables, we cannot but think about Korea's biggest island of Jeju. Korea, of course, Jeju Island is a front runner in renewables, especially here in Korea.
Exactly, Conn-young. The island is a great example of Korea going green, as it aims to rely on renewable energy 100% by 2030. And that also includes replacing all vehicles with electric models, but it is a plan that's still up in the air.
The market is not mature enough, and the price driving force is not low enough, and Jeju's budget is not enough. So, fortunately, the Korean government is very, very active and very, very longing for make out some success story, or small but quick. Jeju is small enough, and Jeju is ready enough. These days, the companies are coming to Jeju Island to set up some special purpose companies such as LG and Korea Electric Power getting together to accelerate the the construction of the infrastructure of electric vehicle, battery charging, or some other related businesses, and
Now, the governor at this whole climate energy conference 10 days ago, which I attended to, said he will probably be able to give out concrete numbers of achievements reached until that point. Now, meanwhile, Conn-young, the Jeju governance delegation is traveling with President Park, and they will be showcasing Jeju Island's goal there in Paris.
Well, definitely looking forward to what the world together can do to resolve a problem that is both an imminent threat to us as well as to our future generations. Great reporting. Thank you for that, Soa.
Thank you. Let's hope for some real outcome.
Well, that was a look at the Eiffel Tower going green for COP21. Now, for an in-depth look into Korea's vow in joining global efforts to combat climate change, its changing role in the global arena, as well as an idea of what the post-Kyoto Protocol would look like. We're joined live in the studio by Chung So-young, Professor of International Studies at Seoul-based Korea University. Professor Chung, good to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Now, the world leaders are meeting in Paris with one mission: to agree on a legally binding agreement on climate change, on greenhouse gas emissions reductions, I suppose. What are the chances that this one will be an agreement that will be really binding from Paris? Because if we look back to COP15 in Copenhagen, the agreement was not followed through.
Well, I mean, everybody is hoping that we're going to have a legally binding agreement to address climate change issues. But actually, as stated before tonight, that the question is how we can actually enhance the actions of the countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Sovereign states are not supposed to take legally binding obligations as much as they should. Rather, they opt out to taking the voluntary basis approach to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In case of the Republic of Korea, we used to have a low carbon green growth policy, or now creative economy, which focuses on the promoting low carbon technologies, which will lead the economic growth, and it will also help us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So question is, of course, what kind of context could be inside in the legally binding agreement? And some countries like the United States may not want to have a legally binding obligations because it's going to pose a serious difficulties for them to get through the Congress to get the ratification process. It's not that simple, but I would say that politically, all the leaders in the world tend to favor legally binding, treaty mechanism, more than before. So we are hoping to have that. At the same time, putting the more emphasis on the bottom-up-based creative economy or low-carbon economy-based, economic growth schemes that should be included in this binding agreement.
Right, and hopefully U.S. and China will be able to come up with some kind of a pledge that is really binding and will follow through on that. What about Korea? What's your impression of Korea's vow to its carbon emissions reductions and other greenhouse, gas reductions?
Well, I mean, we pledged that we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 37%, in year 2030, relative to the BA, business as usual level. And then out of the 37%, 26% will be reduced at the domestic level. Also, 11% will be reduced by utilizing so-called international market mechanisms. So Korea has a very energy-intensive, industry structure. At the same time, it's a small land. and then having a number of the population. So in these circumstances, Korea has done a lot of efforts to meet the expectations of the global world, not only looking at what we can do domestically, also we are hoping to help other countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in other countries. Thereby, we can buy some of the credits out of these activities. So I think I have very positive impression on what Korea has committed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I think entire world will look at how ambitious Korea has made in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the future.
Well, in the bigger picture, how can Korea show its growing presence in the global arena, such as playing as an intermediary between those emerging economies and developed economies, such as in combating a common goal such as the climate change?
Well, we have been always saying that we would like to play the bridging role between developed and developing countries. Among the developing countries, Korea, along with China, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Brazil, we have been forming a sort of advanced developing country groups. And the portion of the greenhouse gas emissions out of this small number of developed countries would represent more than 80% of the total greenhouse gas emissions of all the developing countries. So what Korea can do, as I said today, that if we can develop the low carbon economy, which will ensure the economic growth, at the same time, because of the nature of the low carbon, it will reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Hopefully we are setting that by 37% in 2030, and by doing this, many developed countries will look at Korea and then will say that we will learn these sort of skills and strategies that Korea has employed. And from developed countries' point of view, this is something that actually developed countries at the same time would like to do as well. So Korea also can tell developed countries that, by employing this model, in all the economy-based, developed country economy model could be restructured to meet the global expectations of the reducing greenhouse gas emissions while ensuring the economic growth in low carbon way.
Well, so definitely a chance for Korea to set the example for both emerging economies and developed economies. All right, Chung So-young, Professor of International Studies at Korea University, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you very much.
Banking is essential, banks are not. Well, that's according to Bill Gates way back in 1994. Over the course of the last 21 or so years, that statement is arguably starting to ring true. Well, not only are traditional brick-and-mortar banks offering online banking options, but some banks are now entirely web-based. Korea's financial regulator has given preliminary approval to 2 consortia backed to set up the country's first online-only banks. Our Shin Se-min has it covered from A to Z.
Korea's mobile messenger giant, Kakao, and number 2 telecom operator, KT Corporation, are set to launch internet-only banking services next year, offering financial services free of branches or tellers. In other words, no more trips to the bank to open an account, an unprecedented move that could take the financial market by storm.
We're expecting customers to enjoy cheaper and convenient financial services with an introduction of such internet-only banks.
The internet-only banks come with several major benefits. Higher interest rates as operators cut costs of running offline offices, and middle interest loans for small borrowers. Currently, top-tier banks offer annual interest rates of up to nearly 5%, while secondary financial institutions and non-bank lenders charge interest rates of up to 34%. It's also convenient. KT's K-Bank is teaming up with 20 other companies including Uribank, Hyundai Securities, GS Retail, and Alipay. That means some 23,000 ATMs in Uribank's and GS Retail's convenience stores across the country will become offline direct banking sites for customers. Also, with Alipay, China's largest third-party payment system with Alibaba Group, overseas transfers will be much more simple. Kakao Bank, another internet-only bank, is also expected to roll out differentiated services that can reach customers via its Kakao platform, providing direct mobile brochures and cheaper services. All of these, experts say, is a big step forward and one that's been needed amid a long slump in the banking industry.
By lowering the entry barrier for banks, more competition is expected in the financial circle. But that's also a plus for the consumers, as it gives them more option to choose from.
The two internet-only banks still have to apply for final approval from the Financial Services Commission in order to start operations by mid-next year. Despite the confidence of these online banks, concerns loom that they will run on a deficit, with experts predicting it'll take at least 3 years before they break even, as they may struggle to lure a wide range of customers. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
We're learning today that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, that is, watched over his military's test launch of a submarine-launched ballistic missile over the weekend. A failed test launch, that is, according to South Korea's intelligence agency. Arirang News national defense correspondent Kim Hyun-bin reports.
South Korea's National Intelligence Service told lawmakers on Monday that North Korea test-fired an SOBM on Saturday off the east coast city of Wonsan. But they added the launch is viewed as a failure, as the missile's trajectory could not be traced. That's according to head of the Parliamentary Intelligence Committee, Chu Ho-young, after being briefed by the NIS. The intel indicates Pyongyang has yet to master its sought-after missile technology. The agency added that the North's leader, Kim Jong-un, is presumed to have watched over the failed launch. South Korea's defense ministry says Seoul and Washington are closely watching North Korea's test launches, adding that the recent launch contravenes UN Security Council resolutions.
UN Security Council resolutions prohibit any type of ballistic missile development or launch by North Korea, and Seoul and Washington are closely watching Pyongyang's movements.
In May, North Korea claimed it had successfully launched an SOBM, but analysts say that the test was more of an injection than a launch, as it only flew about 150 meters. The nation's intelligence agency said they were able to trace the path of the trajectory at that time. Pyongyang's test fire over the weekend comes a little more than a week before the two Koreas are set to hold vice-ministerial talks at a jointly run industrial park in the North Korean city of Kaesong on December 11th. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Well, popular neighborhoods in Seoul are often known for unique characteristics that make them stand out from others, thus attracting visitors from in and out of the country. But in recent years, more tourists have translated to growing demand, giving way to new restaurants, cafes, and stores all across those neighborhoods. And that means soaring property prices. This is Korea's version of gentrification. Gentrification, a new urban trend. Our news feature tonight, part 1 of our 2-part series.
This is Seocheon Village, an old neighborhood in central Seoul. It's located near the country's presidential office of Cheongwade, which means it's prohibited to build tall commercial buildings in the area. This, in turn, has allowed Seocheon to keep its traditional landscape, including narrow alleys and hanoks, or traditional Korean houses. But in the last 2 to 3 years, the area has become a popular tourist destination, triggering a wave of commercialization. And it all started on this street, Ogin-gil. Now, what used to be decades-old hanoks have been renovated into restaurants and cafes.
It's just a distance of one bus stop, but in the last 2 years, some 25 new stores opened along this street.
Property values on Ogin-gil Street, on average, have doubled over the last 5 years. With soaring property prices, this rice shop is on the verge of getting evicted after some 40 years of doing business in Seocheon.
It's horrible how things are going about these days. People who've been doing business here are getting kicked out, and landlords are just trying to make profit.
The fruit shop, hair salon, and dry cleaners may as well disappear. It's a fight between property owners and tenants for and against a phenomenon called gentrification. That is, an old neighborhood with cheap property prices becomes popular by developing a unique culture. Then property prices rise and the original residents and business owners get evicted.
Basically, when you have a city which has almost an entirely private housing market, then you're going to find that if the market operates, it's going to do so on the basis of supply and demand and people's ability to pay. And that's going to mean that low-income groups are almost always going to be able to be pushed out.
The Hongdae area in northwest Seoul has already gone through gentrification. It used to be the heart of indie music and home to young artists and private cafes too, but not so much now.
Before, the Hongdae area used to have its own characteristics and a unique atmosphere, but now it's filled with so many franchise stores that there's no reason to come here.
The shops that once defined Hongdae have been pushed out to neighboring districts. This small cafe in Yeonhee-dong first opened in Hongdae, where it attracted many regular customers and profited even nearby stores. But the owner says it was impossible to stay there.
I negotiated with the landlord twice and eventually paid a monthly rent double of what I used to pay. But even after that, I got kicked out the next year.
After going through the same situation 3 times, she knows that this won't be the last either.
When I first got evicted, I thought I was unlucky that one time. But then it happened again and again for the 3rd time. Now every time I open my shop, the first thing I think about is, what if I get kicked out again?
However, making profit from a property according to supply and demand may be an obvious choice for landlords in a capitalist society. And gentrification also helps develop local economies by creating new jobs and opportunities for growth. But residents and business owners of neighborhoods affected by gentrification are being evicted of their homes and businesses, not to mention the loss of unique cultural and urban landscapes.
There will be original residents who won't like the old community's disintegration, but there are also those who try to make profit from the changes. It's a wide spectrum of interests.
Cities are bound to grow and expand, which means that changes are inevitable. What matters then is how to cope with them. In the second installment of this special series, Arirang TV will explore how our society seeks to bring together conflicting interests of multiple stakeholders surrounding the phenomenon of gentrification.
Abortion is one of the most widely debated issues in the U.S. and sometimes leads to violence. Just days ago, a man stormed a Planned Parenthood in Colorado with an assault rifle and killed 3 people. With more on this story, Bruce Harrison joins me live in the studio. Bruce, what's being reported about the suspect?
Hello, Conn-young. The suspect's been identified as a man named Robert Deere. He's about to make his first court appearance as well. He's been described in the press as an eccentric man and a recluse, and based on comments he made, described by witnesses shortly after his arrest, he shot up the clinic as part of an anti-abortion agenda.
Now, this incident comes at a critical time in U.S. politics. How would this attack, I suppose, play into the debate on abortion and women's rights?
Well, Republican candidates that are vying for their party's nomination next year have made outlawing abortion a key pillar of their campaigns. So abortion rights activists were quick to say anti-abortion rhetoric's partly responsible for the attack. At a church vigil over the weekend in Colorado Springs, the town where this happened, the head of the local Planned Parenthood chapter said the shooting was an attack on their entire organization.
And I want to make sure you know that the Planned Parenthood people across the country feel your love, just as they've been sending love through me into this very room and into this community.
Some Republican candidates have said it's too soon to jump to conclusions about why the suspect did what he did. Many of the candidates have reiterated allegations throughout their campaign that some abortion clinics have been selling body parts of aborted babies. Amazon revolutionized online shopping and speedy delivery. Now it's revealed plans to deliver goods even more quickly with drones. On Sunday, the company revealed in a video what its unmanned drones for package delivery would look like. With package in tow, a drone climbs to 400 feet and takes off for a customer's address. Amazon hasn't said when it hopes to have the drones in service. In June, the Federal Aviation Administration said it expected to finalize regulations of the drones over the next 12 months. Rivals Google and Walmart are also developing drones for package delivery.
Well, Bruce, Amazon first announced its plans to use this delivery drone in 2013, and everyone was skeptical about it.
Yeah, but look at them now. This video's come out. It's actual footage of a drone in flight. And in addition to speedy delivery, they say this will make delivery safer, too.
Well, amazing what technology can do. Thank you so much for that, Bruce. Well, for a look at the weather conditions, let's go over to our Jihan. Jihan, we're hearing that China was blanketed with smog today. What about Korea?
Well, some parts of the Jeollado and Gyeongsangdo provinces have been hit by relatively high levels of ultrafine dust since early this evening, but for most parts, including here in the capital, air quality remains good. But the dust could affect western regions, so be sure to stay updated on that for tomorrow. Now, we had a mild day under bright skies to wrap up the last day of November, and the first day of December seems to be even brighter and milder, but lows will go below the freezing point here in the capital with a low of -2 degrees Celsius. And as for the other regions' daily lows, here in the capital will kick off at -2, 1 for Daegu, and 7 for Busan and Jeju. And as for the afternoon highs, Seoul will soar to 11 in Daegu, for 13, 16 in Busan. And it seems like we won't experience bitterly cold conditions as last week, but there will still be big drops in temperatures, and frequent rain is in the forecast for the later half of the week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that is our broadcast on this final day of November, which means it's been a full month since our news center first launched 4 weeks ago. From all of us here at News Center, we want to thank each and every one of you for watching and for your trust in letting us be the source of your day's top stories every day. Good night, and we'll see you right back here same time tomorrow on News Center.